Now he is he's in the building. He's getting some things set up. He's wrapping up with a patient now. We're gonna get him in here in a hot second. Thank you everyone for jumping in here right away. We've got an awesome conversation here today because I know most of my friends. Dustin's 32. I'm 37. We're kind of in this 30s range, and we've been having some conversations about what we've been talking about with some of our friends and things that have also come up at Apex with actual patients when it comes to rehab, preventing injuries, feeling good. So we got a conversation that we want to get into today so that we can just help everyone out in advance. So let me get Dustin in here. As always, if you guys have any questions, you guys want us to touch on something, feel free to just drop it in the comments. We will get to it. Dustin's getting some stuff set up at Apex right now after wrapping up with the patient. He'll join in as soon as he can. Wes, thanks for dropping in. Abby, Miles, Dee Dee, hello. Billy, I saw you drop in. Good to see you guys here. Excited to have everyone on here. Got a lot of good stuff we want to get to. We're gonna touch on ACLs. Especially ACLs, whether you're an athlete, a younger athlete, or you're, hey, Abby, what's going on? Dustin's popping in here now. Hey, Dustin.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, good, glad you're in here. I was just letting people know kind of what we're going to get into today. I let them know that you and I are both in our 30s. You're on the better side of 30. I'm approaching the daunting 40 now that I've eclipsed the mid-30 range. So my sister-in-law put it. And my sister, they're quick to remind me you can't claim mid-30s anymore. But we're going to get into some of that. But I want to talk about ACL rehab, ACL tears. I know we both have some examples in our wheelhouse, and you obviously deal with a lot more at Apex, being an ACL expert over there. Getting older, return from injury, and why you should take that rehab seriously at a younger age, especially if you want to be active later in life. So it's not just about your athletic career up front, but what things could look like later. So we'll get into it first. I don't know if you had something you want to get into right away, anything pressing, but you brought up a story before about a friend of yours that you were having a conversation with, dealing with a little bit of turf toe, decided to kind of go the boot route, wearing a boot, kind of immobilize things, not really doing much else for it, and then just kind of plans to return to activity. Where I wanted to bring that up is I've been in that situation myself with an ankle sprain, kind of just said, hey, rest it, wear the boot, and then you're going to pop back out and play football. And this is when I was a college athlete at the D1 level, playing in the Big 12. We had Oklahoma on the schedule coming up, which is down in the SEC, totally different topic. But I realized, hey, that might not have been the best approach. But I want to have an expert like yourself kind of weigh in on that and what you're seeing when it comes to babying things, going the boot route versus progressive overload and other things that they may get from you or people at Apex.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so for this particular person, she had injured her toe in Pilates class, of all things. Like, how do you do that? But yeah, she had injured her toe. She was like pretty convinced that she had a fracture in her foot. And, I tested her. I said, I don't think that this is a true fracture. But she wasn't fully convinced, having dealt with some injuries in her past that were pretty severe. So she went straight to the boot, and that was against my advice. I was like, hey, I think we need to get some more load in on this foot, get you back to doing more normal things instead of protecting it so much. And so she went the boot route. She was in a boot for 2 weeks and wasn't really improving at all. Like, she was actually having more pain whenever she was out of her boot versus like previously, before she got in the boot at all, right? So basically got her in for an actual eval, talked to her a bit more and said, hey, like, we got to get you into like a more stiff, regular pair of shoes so we can get some actual real load into your foot. Basically, our bodies respond super well to having load put on it versus whenever we're trying to baby it and protect it. See so many people rebound much faster when you normalize just everyday movement, right? So it's kind of what we talked about with her, and lo and behold, like in a week, she was like, oh wow, I'm walking around just fine in my shoe. I'm feeling so much better. For her, it was important. She had a trip going to Europe in 2 weeks, and she was like, so she was trying to protect herself for this trip to Europe and like didn't want to be limping around Europe. Yeah. And honestly, now she's not going to be because she's doing great.
That's a kind of a funny thing to hear because I know most people, coaches, even trainers, parents, even the athlete themselves are probably thinking like, well, it hurts. Let's brace it up and just kind of rest. I'll ice, I'll elevate, I'll take some ibuprofen. And kind of what you're saying is that isn't going to work the best, and it's also probably going to work to your detriment. Is
Yeah,
that
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so like complete rest, like it leads to like muscle weakness and deconditioning, and you're not having that like neurological stimulation that you need, right? So,
Yeah.
that ultimately increases your risk of injury later on whenever you're doing those things.
Yeah.
So what we find is that if you appropriately load yourself and get these exercises in, um, you can improve much faster and come back better.
Yeah, and the example I had was, during the regular season, but I can only imagine for an athlete that's kind of dealing with a more critical time of the season, such as playoffs, and you sustain an ankle injury or something where it's like, hey, let's just brace it, sit out, and then to be ready to go. Talk about some of the other things that need to go on outside of just sitting out, and that's all you're doing. Talk about more of what needs to go on with the whole body if you're planning to come right back and return in a matter of 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like we have our injury timelines of like when things are back to 100%, right? But if someone's like needing to get back to sport soon, then yeah, you need to take care of it. So we need to go through, in your example, if we're dealing with like a sprained ankle, we need to start getting that ankle moving appropriately, right? So we need to go through specific strength exercises. Well, take that back. We're going to take a step back. They're going to come in, they're going to get an evaluation,
Yeah.
right? We're going to figure out what is going on, right? Do they have restricted ranges of motion? Are they hypermobile? Like we're going to figure out what their issues are. And from there, we're going to like create a plan. So do they need to gain mobility? Do they need to gain strength? Do we need to like figure out like we need to figure out how to best support that athlete and what they're going through during that time.
Now, I didn't have this on the agenda today, but since we're on that topic, it sounds like, ankle sprain is basketball season, it's club volleyball season, club soccer season, a lot of stuff going on in that realm, but an ankle sprain is kind of a common thing that goes on. And I know a lot of people, I was one of them, are quick to maybe you have an injury and all of a sudden you want to look to the professional ranks and say, oh, I got an injury just like so-and-so. That's the same thing they got. Or I have an injury just like my teammate. And that might not actually be the case. You have a similar injury, but not quite the same. Could you touch on some of the problems that people may get into when they start lumping themselves into the same boat as someone else, even though things, maybe perceived similar, but could actually have some very big differences?
Yeah, if you compare yourself to like the timeline of an injured professional at all, you're doing yourself a disservice because those people have a team working with them around the clock. Like it is literally their job to get better, right? They don't have school, they don't have work. There's not these other factors that are preventing them from like seeking rehab, right? So whenever you look at someone else and say, oh, they were better in 4 weeks. Well, yeah, they were better in 4 weeks because they were like doing PT for 3 hours a day plus recovery stuff for another 2 or 3 hours a day. So it's not one-to-one when it comes to that.
What about comparing yourself to another teammate of yours? So say, hey, same age, we go to the same school, we play on the same club team. What are some of the problems with just comparing yourself to someone else when it seems like on paper you have the same injury, you see them getting better, maybe you're not? Talk about that a little bit.
No one's the same. No one moves the same. No one's anatomy is the same. And like maybe you're gonna improve faster than your teammate. Maybe with like the right rehab, right, or like the right tools in your toolbox, you can get better faster. But if you're on a delayed track, like maybe that teammate of yours had like a different set of circumstances that allowed them to bounce back faster, right? What if they were stronger to begin with, right? What if they were not hypermobile and you are? So now you have that working against you. So it's never one-to-one when looking at, someone's injury versus someone else's. Yeah, you can kind of say the timeline should be similar, but it's not always the same.
We could talk about the ankle specifically still if you want to, or maybe an MCL injury, something that's still kind of popular in the sports that we've already listed, the club volleyball, club soccer, basketball. One thing that I noticed in the training room when I'm in there and I got my list of exercises and I've got the same injury as another teammate of mine, even a similar body type. In football, you got a lot of different body types. You got the skill guys, kind of the mid skill was the realm I was in, the tight ends, linebackers, and then you got the linemen, and the bigger guys. So, say if you're still the same body type, same position, you appear to be the same strength level, athletic level, but you have the same injury and you see someone progressing faster doing the same exercise as you are. Talk about maybe some of the differences and things that actually could be going on as opposed to, the other route.
Yeah, I mean, a whole host of things. It's like if your stress is high, right? Your nutrition, all those things also play a big factor in the role of recovery. Are you sleeping well enough, right? If you're, in your example, you're a student athlete in that case, maybe you have a big test coming up, you're not sleeping well, and they are just floating by in easy classes, right? Stress is low, so they're going to bounce back faster. And then specific injuries too, what works for one person doesn't always work for someone else. So physiologically, yes, we're going to load things the same, but that doesn't always mean that it's a back squat's not going to affect everyone the same as oh, maybe we need to go to a front squat for this person.
Yeah.
It's not always equal.
So it's really easy or easy to understand for someone like yourself that, hey, just because you have the same body type, athletic ability, and appearing the same injury, you may need two totally different things.
Yeah, exactly.
We've been in business now a little over 10 years at Apex and always trying to improve and get new things. And you've been with us or been around Apex since 2021. One cool thing now that I love that we got it are the force plates. It sounds like something like the force plates could really help highlight some of these underlying differences with people, especially in scenarios like the one we're talking about. To talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. If you get on the force plates, you can look at things like your jump height, your power off of one leg compared to another, the way that you absorb force on one side compared to the other. So all those things can be very beneficial, and that's just looking at the lower extremity. Today we tested people with their upper extremity. We were testing an overhead athlete, a baseball player, doing some shoulder tests with the force plates just to see functionally are they strong in an overhead position or not. And what we found was no, this kid needed to work on his overhead strength because to take the demands of the throwing that he needs to have, he needs to be stronger. So yeah, the force plates are a valuable aspect and tool that we have to just highlight those differences and where you may be lacking.
So no matter how trained or qualified the eye of the coach, the trainer, the PT, the force plates are able to identify something a little bit more specific. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. You can be totally tricked by what you see, but then you get on those force plates and the numbers are real. So you can't run from the numbers.
I know we've been talking about ankles, and I know we use them a lot more, would you say, for lower extremity than upper extremity?
Yeah. For sure.
Since I've been on them just a little bit that I have, and kind of tying back in with the taking your rehab seriously when you get injured in your teens and 20s, if you're a college or pro athlete, like I was and sustained an ankle injury, I went through the things I needed to get through to get back to playing. But once I got back to playing, I thought, okay, those are kind of done. I'm playing now. Then years later, I get on the force plates and I start seeing not just some of the force input and output, but also some of the conditioning aspects that it can show of hey, your endurance fades on that side.
Yeah.
Talk about some of those aspects you see over there when using force plates, and then we'll get into the other part of that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. If you don't take care of this stuff early on, or you think that you're going to bounce back every single time you get hurt, there's going to be a time when you don't. It just it happens, right? So if we can see those things and identify them early on here, then we can try to address them to help you continue to do the things that you want to do throughout your life, right? You want to go up to the mountain when you're 40. You can't be neglecting yourself when you're 20 and 30.
Yeah. So I'm still trying to get up there and ski hard. I know we got one ski day in together, and I've started to realize, hey, as much as I wanted to get back from both the meniscus surgeries I've had, the ankle surgery I had, but as much as I wanted to get back quickly and get back to playing, I've realized, hey, it was a lot more important to probably think about long term. Hey, you want to ski when you're 50, you want to be feeling good when you're 60, you want to be able to play with your kids, grandkids, things of that nature. how does it, what type of repercussions that you may know of people that just kind of cut rehab short when they're in those teens and 20s? Is there any points you want to hit on there?
Yeah, I've seen people just completely like give up skiing, right? Because they thought that they were good in like high school when they injured themselves, or in college when they injured themselves, and then they just like finally hit that point where they didn't bounce back, and now something that they love to do, they just want to avoid completely now, right? Or maybe they're a avid hiker, and that's something that you should be able to reasonably do into your 50s, 60s, 70s even. Um, but you go and neglect yourself early on and don't address your issues when you're 50, 60, 70, you're not doing those things anymore, or you're fearful of it. And so then that is a huge like lifestyle change for the negative that you don't want to actually have.
So other than, doing your PT exercises steadily, what is it that you would recommend to people that have gone through, maybe a meniscus surgery, not a repair scope, or any type of, a little bit larger injury, surgical intervention, at a younger age? What would you be recommending to them that they continue to do throughout their, the next years of their life so that they can still go enjoy those activities?
Yeah, you got to be strength training and resistance training. That's like a must. You have to be trying to make sure that your range of motion isn't fading, um, because ultimately, as you do age, what we see is that those things are harder to like improve over time, right? You don't improve as well when you're in your 20s and 30s. You improve much faster than when you're 40, 50, and 60. So like you need to start early on so that you don't have those deconditioning years that are just going to be negative to you.
Totally. Uh, Man, there's a lot of different directions I could take that last one. Hey, Johnny, thanks for joining in. Um, Going through some things when you start saying, mobility and range of motion. I know most people, what pops into head is static stretching, yoga, things like that. But I know you guys obviously have a different approach to that, and different things to add in, or maybe that should be a larger part of the picture. Touch on what you may mean by mobility and range of motion, and how that can be achieved, or at least maintained as you
Yeah,
age.
I mean, personally, I don't prescribe just a whole lot of static stretching. Is there a time and place for it? Sure. But what I find is that when you're strength training, if you're strength training through a full range of motion for a specific muscle group, let's say your hamstrings, for example. If you target your hamstrings through a deadlift and you use a full range of motion, you're going to get more of that range of motion that's going to stick versus just sitting there doing a static hamstring stretch on the ground. So those are the kind of things that we like to do here at Apex that we find that other places may be prescribing other things. Um, and then, whenever you're looking at those things through the lens of like long term, especially when there's like an injury involved and it's related to like decreased strength or like decreased load tolerance or decreased conditioning or poor range of motion, you don't want to like take those things for granted and just say like, oh well, I can just like kind of get through this and I'll be bounced back and fine, because ultimately what we find is that those things have led to your injury, and if you don't address it, then next time you go back and try to do the thing that you're trying to do, that injury pops up again.
You bring me to another example I wanted to hit on. Thank you, everyone, by the way, for joining in. We're here with Dustin Zink, Doctor of Physical Therapy at Apex, Performance Wellness and Rehab, giving us some good insight on a variety of topics. But we're talking about, kind of mobilizing or immobilizing injuries, taking rest, taking time away, and not going through an active progressive overload plan of care, and then suddenly trying to return. Whether you're a youth athlete or a college athlete, or you're someone that's active, like we are in love snowboarding and skiing, tennis, pickleball, or you're older and want to just go hiking. We're talking about, what the actual setbacks are from being injured and just totally stepping away and then trying to bounce back to it, and what that timeline should look like in terms of rehab. So the example I want to get to, Dustin, since we do see basketball players, and this is something that I had, was jumper's knee. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, hey, just, ice them. We're going to sit you out. We're going to take it light in practice. We'll just get your free throws in, maybe take you through some stationary dribbling drills. work on some basic things, you can do the walkthrough plays, but we'll take you easy for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then we'll just get you right back into play because in theory, your knee should be feeling better because it's been resting. You just touched on how, if you don't address why it hurt in the first place, it's not going to feel any better when you come back. So I already know the answer, but talk about that one specifically because we're in basketball season, we're in club volleyball season. And I know that kind of comes up a lot for high school athletes out there that are growing, working through the demands of the club season, becoming more and more competitive at a younger and younger age. Talk about all that.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is just like a true overuse injury when it comes to jumper's knee. Like those tissues on your knee are just not up to the demands that you're placing on it, being in the gym every day, and just the extreme amount of force that it's having to produce and accept over time. And what we find, or what I have found mostly, is there's like just a lack of strength in a lot of these high school athletes that we're seeing. Not speaking poorly on like basketball players in particular, but like a lot of times I don't see those kids weightlifting in the gym. I don't see them even maintaining throughout the season, like finding something that they can do. So, they're just grinding all day in the gym, but they're not taking care of their body on the outside of the gym at any reasonable amount.
Yeah, you don't have to take it easy on them. I was one of them. I used to, playing baseball, basketball, and football growing up. My dream was to always play in the NBA. I spent the least amount of time playing football, the least amount of focus on football skill work, hardly spent any extra attention to it outside of when the fall came. I played football and that was it. But as soon as that was over, I couldn't wait for basketball season, and I would play basketball for the rest of the year, all through the winter, all through the spring, going into AAU season, and I would do as much as I could in the summer to keep working on all the different basketball skills and drills associated to it. But what I started to realize coming into high school was I was the only person that thought, hey, let's continue to strength train because I knew I needed that for football. But I was the only one, along with one other kid that also played football, on the high school basketball team that would step into the weight room at all, ever, all year. And although I did deal with some, knee stuff early on as a freshman, sophomore, I noticed some increased resiliency as things went on as a junior and a senior. What type of strength training approaches should basketball players be taking? Because I know one thing was always like, oh, you don't want to, work out too hard and crush your legs because we got, there's a lot of running. You don't want to do anything too heavy on the upper body and mess up your shot. All these things that I think people are just so focused on in-season strength training. But, what would off-season and in-season look like for a basketball player?
Yeah, so off-season is going to be like much more high intensity in general. Like that's when we're going to like find the most gains, right? We're going to be pushing for that. But when it comes to being in season, like you still need to be in the weight room. It's just at a lower intensity. And actually what we have found is that being in the weight room, even on a game day, is more beneficial than just sitting there doing nothing. It primes your body, gets it ready for the demands that it's about to have put on it, right? So I don't know if you see like pregame of like the Lakers, like they'll show LeBron in the weight room, like getting reps in. He's not necessarily taking it easy. Well, he's taking it relatively for himself easy, but he's still pushing himself in the weight room pretty dang hard.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it looks like is, yes, there is a time to push and grind and to make your gains, but you also have to be in that maintenance phase. And ultimately that maintenance phase is what's going to keep you more healthy throughout the season versus just hooping. We see the same thing with baseball players too, right? Like, especially as baseball has turned into like a full year-round sport and there's almost no breaks. Like kids are coming up with shoulder injuries or elbow injuries, and it's like, well, there's a time and a place for playing baseball, but we also need to affect other things that are going to keep you healthy.
Definitely. That example is great that you brought up with LeBron. I always preached when we first, started Apex and finally got into adding in some training and working with athletes and their needs and helping them grow, reach the goals, that they had for increasing vertical jump, speed, power, strength, whatever it was. I always pointed out, I try to point out to a lot of people, number one, throughout a college football and an NFL season, you are always working out throughout the whole season. And, those positions I mentioned, the skill guys only had 2 days required. It wasn't a choice. It was a requirement to lift weights for 45 minutes, 2 times a week for those guys. For the mid-sized guys, tight ends, linebackers, running backs, and the big guys, you had 3 days required all season long, even in the NFL. And that's one of the most physical sports out there, not the most endurance oriented like basketball. But then you flip over to the channel, and see that in the NBA, you see someone, James Harden. I had a few clips of him, tried to show him. LeBron, I know most people think, well, he's just a physical freak, but the amount of time and attention he's putting in around the clock to certain exercises really highlights why something like this is important. And I wanted to ask you, we see a lot of people that come in and it's like, hey, you just have an overuse related injury. What are the best ways to kind of offset that?
Yeah. So is there a time for protection of whatever? Well, we'll just stay on the topic of jumpers. Is there a time for a bit of a protection of that? Sure. But ultimately, if the issue comes down to a tissue tolerance thing, then we need to find out ways to get the capacity of that tissue to raise the ceiling of them, right? So it's going to be, yes, let's help make you feel a little bit better in the short term, but then we're going to build you up slowly so that you can sustain playing through a season without, reverting back to like getting hurt again. And I'm going to touch on again, like oftentimes we see like those injuries are related to like a decreased strength or low tolerance. So why would complete rest ever be the answer? That's just going to bring down, that's just going to lead to more deconditioning and increased injury over time.
Yeah, I've seen you guys use a lot of different stuff in there to directly work on something that someone has injured. I know the BFR, blood flow restriction, is a great way to place load on an area that may have pain, but kind of replicate the load that a heavier weight may have. Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah, for sure. It mimics it tricks you into thinking that you're having heavier demands put on yourself. Your body responds like that, but it's at a much lower load.
So if your knee kind of hurts when you're squatting, step ups, lunges, you can utilize BFR to present the load that heavier weight would and still get those same effects, but most likely not have the pain. Is that right?
Yeah. And we oftentimes will use that up until a point, and then once your body's able to start accepting actual real load, then we progress you on into that.
That sounds good. Then another part is, I didn't have all the tools and resources in high school, and straight up sitting out was tough. But I noticed you guys have ski erg, seated battle ropes. I've seen Emily use some different seated or kneeling, depending upon the type of leg injury. Kettlebell swings. Are there some other med ball throws? Are there some other cardio related exercises you like to use that in the list right there?
I love using the ski erg that we have here. If someone comes in like a boot or something and it is an injury where we cannot have them like be on their feet, yeah, we're hitting the ski erg for their warm up 100% of the time. Battle ropes are great. Med balls, love them. Yeah, you nailed it.
You got a lot back there. I mean, you can see it right here. I did want to get to one last thing. I know we touched on it briefly. We both like going to the mountain. We've had a fair share of people that come in, sadly, from mountain-related accidents, ACL being one of them. I know it's not the only way ACL injuries occur, and it's not the primary one that people come into Apex for, but I wanted to talk about ACL rehab a little bit. We can get into it another day, exclusively, because I know there's a lot going on with that, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of touch on some ACL topics. I know you said you just had one, why we got started just a shade late, but what's going on with the ACL world? What are you seeing in there, and what are some of the biggest topics that you want to touch on right now?
Yeah, I've had recent conversations with 2 skiing ACL related injuries. One was someone that did not require surgery, but has really made a tremendous amount of progress. And she feels that, she's ready to get back up on the mountain and do her thing, which is great. I believe that there's always things that we can continue to work on and make sure that she's hitting the metrics of strength that we have set out. We use our force decks, our dynamo, to test strength, and just we want to make sure that people are as sound as possible and make evidence-based choices that makes sense to protect them from re-injury later on. I have another person that I've talked to recently that is considering surgery. You know, should she have it? Should she not? That's a topic for another day, I think. But ultimately, there's like, she needs to improve her range of motion as soon as possible. And then she needs to start rehabbing. Even if she does decide to have surgery, she needs to start rehabbing now so that she is prepped and ready for surgery in the future and bounces back stronger. If she's doing nothing for the next, it could take 6 months to get into surgery, then that's just 6 months that she's going to be even further behind from not being as active as she even was before her injury.
That's a great point to get into. I never even thought about that until people started coming in and saying, hey, I can't get in, especially in 2020, 2021, even 22. People were, even now it sounds like, you might not be just getting right in for ACL surgery. It may be more than a month. What is it that people would be going through with a torn ACL for surgery that's going to really help them out?
It depends case to case, but we try to meet people wherever they're at. If they're a high functioning, what we would term as a coper, then you can go straight back into a lot of the same exercises that maybe you were doing or maybe should have been doing previously. So I've had people come in as a coper, that's someone that hasn't had surgery yet, and we put them on under the barbell and get them back to doing back squats. They're doing Bulgarians, they're doing lunges, and they're doing it well. And that's kind of the goal with that. And if they're a little bit further behind, definitely going to need surgery, then we're still going to target their quads and make sure that their quads are ready for the surgery, and then for after surgery that they have, so that they can have the best recovery available, and they're not delayed. It could take weeks, it could take months for some people to get into surgery, get better, get into PT. And we don't want them to just be hanging out doing nothing during that time. So targeting the quad and making sure their quad strength is to top notch and making sure the range of motion is back is pretty critical.
You can tell me if I'm wrong, but for people getting ACL surgery, do you recommend them getting right into PT afterwards, or is there a delayed phase? Does it depend on the type of graft they get, or talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think oftentimes I want to see someone as soon as possible. I've seen someone 2 days after surgery.
Okay.
So it's nice whenever everything is still fresh and you can just set expectations, right, of what to expect, because it's a journey. It is not a short recovery. So I like having them early, making sure that we're on the same page with everything, and then getting them, on their own if they need to for a short time before coming back into PT. But I just like to have our expectations set and our goals set.
For the average adult out there that may sustain an ACL, have surgery, what's one or more, but one big thing you would say hey, you really got to make sure this happens, or else you may not be setting yourself up for good long-term success. And you might be limiting yourself from things like tennis, skiing, hiking, and all that later on.
Yeah, no, the first thing is range of motion. Oftentimes, whenever someone tears their ACL, there's an extension range of motion, so they're not able to get their leg all the way straight. And we need to get that back as soon as possible. So that is goal number one.
Okay. How about going through the whole, after that's completed and someone's feeling good and they're thinking well, I got my range of motion, I don't need to come here anymore, or I don't need this anymore. What would you say the next biggest point is?
Yeah, just strength, probably. It varies again person to person, but it's likely strength at that point.
Okay.
We have key metrics that we have set that are backed by evidence of these are the things that you need to hit before going back to your sport or whatever you're wanting to do. Otherwise, your risk of re-injury is exponentially higher.
What are some of those metrics for the timeline? Say hey, I'm walking, I have range of motion. What about what's the metric for getting into jogging or running?
Are we talking after a surgery?
Yeah, after an ACL surgery, what are the metrics you guys are working off of to say, hey, it's now fine to start jogging. Hey, now it's fine to start jumping. Hey, now we can start running. What are some of those metrics that people may need to hear as a reminder here if they didn't come in and see us, or they're listening from some other place? Then they need to check this out before they just kind of move on and think they're good.
Sure. Yeah, after you have a surgery and let's say you do get your range of motion back, we're going to make sure that you're having no swelling, your pain is minimal. If the goal is no pain, right, but minimal at best. And then we're going to make sure that your quad strength is at 70% of your body weight in force production, or we also look at torque, which is a bit of a physics equation, but we're looking at like 2.0 torque to body weight on our knee extension test to make sure that you can go back to running safely.
Okay. What about, and now for the high school, college athletes, even middle school athletes, now these ACLs are happening at younger ages. What about these people that are thinking like, okay, it's been 9 months. I am now cleared by my doctor or my surgeon. I'm going back into playing. What about that? It seems minor, it seems small, it seems okay because the doctor said it or the surgeon said it, or it's been 9 months and that's what I was told, and now you just return. Talk about that gap a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, 9 months is like the bare minimum, and what we're truly seeing is like it's more like 12 months, 14 months before people are even like hitting those metrics that they need to hit, and that would be like after you've hit range of motion, pain goals, your swelling's you're not having swelling, you're able to hit your running goal, right? So now we're looking at your return to sport specific. Now we want your strength to be at like 95% of your body weight, or your torque to body weight ratio at a 3 versus a 2, which was what it was for running. So we're hitting those things, and then we're tracking things on our force plates, like your jump height, limb to limb. We're making sure that your body is ready to take the demands of your sport at a safe level, because what we see is that like basically like 40 to 50% of athletes don't go back to their sport at the high enough level or previous level. So how do we avoid that? Well, we hit these metrics.
Got it. Well, that sounds good that you guys have something to, objectively assess things, so people can see it for themselves and see, hey, here's where I am at. I may feel good, I may feel ready, but to take the most cautious approach or take the most accurate approach and not set myself up for, another injury, which is even worse, is having the same one happen to you again. Huge setback, and probably a big reason why people quit sports entirely. These are all good things. We'll get on another day and talk a little bit more about the ACL specifics. I know we've been on here a little bit longer than we anticipated already. I appreciate all your insight, Dustin. Is there anything else you wanted to leave with anybody? You good?
Come see me.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone, on this Friday. Dustin's going to get going. This is going to get sent out. If you want to join our free newsletter community, go ahead and just DM us newsletter. We can get you on there. We're going to break more aspects of this down over time. We're going to get back on here and talk about more. If there's always something you want to see, just let us know. Shoot us a DM, give us a comment. And until next time, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Yeah.